Dr. Unikim pressed her face against the cold window of her research station and watched the morning sky turn purple. The strange color meant another electromagnetic storm was coming too. Henule 7, she had been studying these storms for 3 years now, and still nobody believed her theories about them. The research station sat alone on a rocky mountain peak, far from the human settlement below. Una liked it that way. Down in the valley, the other colonists whispered about her work. They called her crazy. They said she wasted time studying useless animals instead of helping the colony grow. Una turned away from the window and walked to her computer. The screen showed readings from sensors placed all around the mountain. Energy levels were rising fast. Something big was coming. She grabbed her coat and stepped outside onto the metal platform that surrounded her station. Cold wind hit her face immediately. The air smelled like metal and ozone, the way it always did before a storm. But this felt different, stronger. In the distance, she could see the floating cities of the Valari people. They looked like giant jellyfish, made of crystal and light, drifting slowly through the clouds. The Valari had lived on this planet for thousands of years. They understood the storms better than any human ever could, but they hated Una just as much as her own people did. She walked to the edge of the platform and looked down the mountain. Small animals were moving up the rocky slopes, dozens of them, all heading for higher ground. This was unusual. Most creatures on Henule 7 hid in caves when storms came. They did not climb toward the dangerous peaks. Una pulled out her binoculars and focused on the moving shapes. There were small fox-like creatures with silver fur, bird things with wings that sparked with tiny lightning bolts. Even some of the larger predators were climbing, their movements urgent and afraid. All of them were what the Valari called animals that could sense and sometimes control the electromagnetic fields that covered the planet. The colonists thought they were just normal wildlife. The Valari thought they were sacred. Una thought they were the key to understanding everything. Her radio crackled to life. Dr. Kim, this is Colonial Control. We're showing massive energy readings from your area. Are you safe up there? Una picked up the radio. The voice belonged to Administrator Doyon Park, the man who ran the human settlement. He had tried to shut down her research 5 times in the past year. I'm fine, Administrator. Just monitoring the approaching storm system. You need to evacuate. The readings we're getting are off the charts. This isn't a normal storm. Una looked at her own sensors. He was right. The energy levels were higher than anything she had recorded before. But that made this storm more important to study, not more dangerous to avoid. I'm staying. My equipment is here. I need to record whatever is coming. She heard Parkside through the radio. Dr. Kim, I'm ordering you to return to the settlement immediately. We cannot risk losing personnel for your animal studies. The radio went quiet. Una clipped it back to her belt without responding. She had heard the same words too many times. Animal studies, as if understanding the planet they lived on was not important. She went back inside and checked her equipment one more time. Everything was working properly. The computers were recording electromagnetic readings every second. Cameras pointed in all directions to capture whatever happened next. She had spent 3 years preparing for a storm like this one. A sound made her look up. Something was tapping against the window. Una walked over and saw a small bird perched outside. Its feathers were dark blue with silver tips. Tiny sparks danced between its wingtips. The bird looked directly at her through the glass. Its eyes were bright yellow and seemed almost intelligent. It tapped the window again with its beak, then flew away toward the peak of the mountain. Una had never seen this species before. She grabbed her camera and coat again, then hurried outside. The bird was gone, but she could see where it had flown. Higher up the mountain, toward the ancient stone structures the Valari had built long ago. The wind was getting stronger. Purple clouds were gathering overhead, swirling in patterns that hurt to look at directly. But the small animals were still climbing, all of them heading in the same direction the bird had gone. Una made a decision. She locked down her station and started climbing after them. The path up the mountain was rough and steep. Loose rocks slipped under her feet. The air grew thinner with each step, but she kept going. Something important was happening, and she needed to understand what it was. After an hour of climbing, she reached a flat area near the peak. Ancient stone pillars stood in a circle here. The Valari had built them thousands of years ago, before humans ever came to this world. Nobody knew what they were for. The sky-touched animals were gathering around the pillars, dozens of different species, all sitting quietly in the shadow of the old stones. They were not hiding from the storm, they were waiting for it. Una crouched behind a boulder and watched. The animals seemed calm but alert. Their eyes all looked toward the same patch of sky. The purple clouds were thickest there, spinning faster and faster. Then she saw it. A shape moved through the clouds, larger than any bird she had ever seen. Its wings were spread wide, easily 20 feet from tip to tip. Lightning danced along its feathers as it rode the wind currents. It was the most beautiful creature Una had ever seen. The great bird circled the stone pillars 3 times, then landed on the tallest one. The smaller animals all turned to look at it. Some of them made soft chirping sounds. Others just watched in silence. The bird's head turned, and its eyes met Una's across the distance. She held her breath. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The world seemed to pause around them. Even the wind grew quiet. Then the bird spread its wings and let out a cry that echoed across the mountains. The sound was not just noise. It was a warning, a call to action, a promise that change was coming. The storm above them began to grow stronger, but Una was no longer afraid. She was exactly where she needed to be. The great bird folded its wings and settled on the pillar to wait. Just like the other animals, just like Una herself. Something was coming to Haniel 7, something that would change everything. Una stayed hidden behind the boulder for 2 hours, watching the great bird. The creature never moved from its perch on the stone pillar. Its yellow eyes scanned the sky constantly, as if searching for something only it could see. The smaller animals had settled down around the ancient stones. They formed rough circles with the largest creatures on the outside and the smallest in the center. Una had never seen sky-touched animals organize themselves this way before. It looked almost like they were preparing for battle. The purple storm clouds kept growing thicker. Lightning flashed inside them, but no thunder followed. The silence was more frightening than any sound would have been. Una's radio buzzed again. She turned the volume down low and listened. All residents of New Sol Colony. This is Administrator Park. We have issued a severe weather warning. All personnel must report to the underground shelters immediately. This is not optional. She looked at the great bird again. It had not moved, but its head was tilted slightly, as if it too was listening to the radio transmission. Dr. Kim, if you can hear this, respond immediately. The Valari Council has sent word that this storm is unlike anything in their recorded history. You are in extreme danger, Una almost answered, but something stopped her. The great bird had turned its head to look directly at her. Its eyes seemed to be trying to tell her something important. She put the radio away and stood up slowly. The bird watched her every movement but showed no fear. Step by step, Una walked toward the circle of stone pillars. The smaller animals saw her coming. Some of them made soft warning sounds. Others backed away. But none of them ran. They seemed to understand that she was not a threat. Una stopped at the edge of the circle, 20 feet from the great bird. This close, she could see details that amazed her. Its feathers were not just dark blue. They held every color of the electromagnetic spectrum, shifting and changing like oil on water. Tiny sparks of electricity jumped between the individual feathers. The bird opened its beak and made a sound. Not the loud cry from before. This was quieter, more whimsical, like a song without words. "What are you trying to tell me?" Una whispered. The bird cocked its head to one side. Then it spread one wing and pointed toward the horizon. Una followed its gaze and saw something that made her blood run cold, far above the purple storm clouds. Something else was moving. A dark shape, barely visible against the black of space. It was huge, much larger than any ship the humans had brought to Haniel 7, and it was getting closer. Una pulled out her binoculars and focused on the shape. What she saw made no sense. The object was not a ship at all. It looked organic, like a massive jellyfish made of metal and shadow. Tentacles, miles long, reached down from its body, already touching the outer edge of the planet's atmosphere. "Impossible," she breathed. The great bird made another sound, sharper this time. It was clearly trying to communicate with her. The smaller animals began making noises too, a chorus of chirps and calls and howls that seemed to echo the birds. Urgency. Una looked at the readings on her portable scanner. The electromagnetic levels were climbing faster than ever before, but the energy was not coming from the storm clouds. It was coming from above, from the impossible creature in space. She needed to warn the colonies, both human and Valari, whatever that thing was. It posed a threat to everyone on the planet. Una ran back toward her research station, leaving the animals behind. The great bird called after her, a sound of disappointment and worry. But she had to get to her communications equipment. The climb down the mountain took 30 minutes. By the time she reached her station, the readings on all her instruments had gone completely off the charts. The approaching creature was doing something to the planet's electromagnetic field. Draining it somehow, she activated her long-range transmitter and sent an emergency message to the human colony. Colonial Control. This is Dr. Kim. I have visual confirmation of an unidentified object in high orbit. It appears to be organic in nature and is interfering with planetary energy systems. Recommend immediate evacuation of all surface installations. The response came back within minutes. Dr. Kim, we show no objects on our sensors. Are you certain about what you saw? Una looked at her data again. The readings were clear. Something massive was approaching the planet. Why could she detect it when their more advanced systems could not? She tried contacting the Valari next. Their communication systems were different from human technology, based on electromagnetic pulses rather than radio waves. It took her several attempts to establish a connection. When she finally reached them, the response was immediate and harsh. Human researcher, your presence near the sacred stones is forbidden. You have contaminated the ancient site with your alien thoughts. Remove yourself immediately. Listen to me, Una said. There is something in orbit above the planet, something that is draining our electromagnetic field. Your people are in danger. The sky-touched ones do not speak to contaminated minds. Your words are meaningless. The connection went dead. Una stared at her equipment in frustration. Neither the humans nor the Valari would listen to her warnings. They thought she was crazy, or lying, or both. A shadow passed over her station. She looked up and saw the great bird circling overhead. It had followed her down from the mountain. As she watched, it landed on the metal railing of her observation deck. The bird was even more magnificent up close. It stood nearly 4 feet tall with a wingspan that seemed to stretch forever. Its feathers crackled with tiny electrical discharges, but its eyes were what captured her attention. They were intelligent, aware, and filled with desperate urgency. The bird made that musical sound again. Then it did something that made Una's heart stop. It extended one wing toward her, as if offering to let her touch it. Una had spent years studying sky-touched creatures. She knew they never made physical contact with humans. The electromagnetic fields that surrounded them were usually too dangerous. But this bird was different. The electrical activity in its feathers was controlled, deliberate. She reached out slowly, her hand trembling. The bird remained perfectly still, watching her with those intelligent yellow eyes. When her fingers touched the leading edge of its wing, the world exploded into sensation. Una felt the planet's electromagnetic field as if it were part of her own nervous system. She could sense the massive creature in orbit, feeding on the planet's energy like a parasite. She could feel the fear of every sky-touched animal across the continent, and she could understand, for the first time, what the great bird was trying to tell her. The creature in space was not alone. More were coming, and if they were not stopped, every living thing on Hanjul 7 would die. The bird pulled its wing back, breaking the connection. Una staggered, her mind reeling from what she had experienced. When she looked up, the bird was watching her with what seemed like hope. For the first time in her life, Una was not alone in her research. She had found someone who understood the danger they all faced, someone who needed her help to save the world. The great bird stayed on Una's observation deck for the rest of the day. It did not eat or drink. It simply watched the sky and waited. Every few hours, it would make soft musical sounds, as if calling to something far away. Una tried to work at her computer, but she could not concentrate. The brief connection with the bird had shown her things that seemed impossible. The creature in orbit was not just big. It was alive, and it was hungry. As evening approached, the bird suddenly became restless. It paced back and forth on the railing, its feathers crackling with more electricity than before. Then it looked at Una and made a sharp cry. The message was clear. Follow me. The bird took flight and circled the research station 3 times. Then it headed up the mountain toward the ancient stone pillars. Una grabbed her equipment pack and followed. The climb was harder in the failing light. The purple storm clouds had grown so thick that they blocked most of the sun. Strange colors danced in the sky above, unlike anything Una had ever seen. When she reached the stone circle, the bird was waiting for her. But something was different. The smaller sky-touched animals were gone. The area around the pillars was empty except for the great bird and herself. The bird walked to the center of the circle and began scratching at the ground with its talons. Dirt and small stones flew in all directions. After several minutes of digging, it stepped back and called to Una. She approached carefully and looked at what the bird had uncovered. Hidden beneath the dirt was a metal plate covered with symbols. The markings looked old, much older than the stone pillars themselves. Una knelt down and brushed away more dirt. The metal plate was larger than she had first thought. It covered most of the center of the stone circle. The symbols carved into its surface were unlike anything in Valari, writing, or human languages. The bird made another sound and pointed with its wing toward one particular symbol. Una looked closer. The marking showed a large creature with tentacles reaching down toward a small circle. Around the circle were smaller symbols that might have been stars or planets. "This is a warning," Una whispered. Someone left a warning about the creatures in space. The bird nodded, as if it understood her words. Then it spread its wings and took flight again. This time it flew toward the highest peak of the mountain, where even the Valari rarely went. Una followed, though the path was treacherous in the dim light. The air grew thin and cold. Her breath came in short gasps, but the bird kept looking back to make sure she was still coming at the top of the peak. Una found something that made her heart race. Built into the living rock was a structure that was clearly not Valari. It was much older, made of the same metal as the plate in the stone circle. Strange symbols covered every surface. The bird landed on a flat area in front of the structure and waited. Una approached slowly, her hands shaking with excitement and fear. The entrance to the structure was sealed, but the bird walked to a specific spot on the metal door and tapped it with its beak. The symbols around the door began to glow with soft blue light. Then the door slid open with a grinding sound. Inside, the structure was one large room filled with devices that Una could not identify. But along the walls were carvings that told a story, the same story that had been hinted at on the metal plate below. The carvings showed a peaceful world with floating cities and ground settlements. Various creatures lived in harmony. Then the sky darkened and massive shapes descended from space. The creatures had tentacles, like jellyfish, but they were the size of mountains. The space creatures fed on the planet's energy. They drained the electromagnetic fields that all life depended on. City after city went dark. The ground settlements withered and died. Even the sky-touched animals began to weaken and fall. But the final carvings showed something different. Sky-touched creatures worked together, combining their abilities. They created a network of electromagnetic power that fought back against the invaders. The space creatures retreated, unable to drain a planet that defended itself. Una studied the carvings carefully. The planet in the story was clearly Haniel 7. The floating cities were Valari. The ground settlements looked like early human colonies. This was not just any world, this was their world. The creatures had been here before, she said to the bird. Your people fought them off once, but they've come back. The bird made a sad sound and walked to the center of the room. There, on a raised platform, was a device that looked like a communication system. The bird placed one wing on the device and looked at Una expectantly. She approached the platform carefully. The device was clearly ancient, but it still hummed with power. Strange symbols flowed across its surface like living text. Her hand on the device, next to the bird's wing. Immediately, her mind filled with images and information. She saw Haniel 7 as it had been thousands of years ago. The planet was covered with life, more varied and abundant than anything that existed now. The sky-touched creatures were not just animals. They were the planet's immune system, evolved over millions of years to detect and fight off threats from space. The space creatures were called harvesters. They traveled from world to world, feeding on planetary energy. They had destroyed hundreds of planets across the galaxy. Most worlds had no defense against them, but some worlds, like Hanu, had developed sky-touched creatures. These animals could sense the harvesters coming and organize a defense. The key was coordination. The sky-touched creatures had to work together, guided by a central intelligence that could see the big picture in the ancient battle. That central intelligence had been provided by a group of beings that no longer existed on Hangul 7. But the genetic memory of that cooperation remained in the sky-touched creatures. They were still waiting for someone to coordinate them. Someone like the great bird, someone like Una herself. The images faded, and Una pulled her hand away from the device. The bird was watching her intently, its eyes filled with hope and desperation. "You need me to help coordinate the defense?" Una said. "The sky-touched creatures can fight the harvesters, but only if they work together, and only if someone guides them." The bird made an affirmative sound and walked to the entrance of the structure. Outside, the storm was growing stronger. But now Una could see what was really happening. The harvester was beginning to feed. The planet's electromagnetic field was being drained away. They did not have much time. The colonies, both human and Valari, would be dead within days if the harvester was not stopped. And Una was the only person who understood the danger. She looked at the great bird, her unlikely ally in a fight that would determine the fate of all life on Hangul 7. "We need help," she said. "We cannot do this alone." The bird spread its wings and let out a cry that echoed across the mountains. Far below, other cries answered. The sky-touched creatures were gathering again. The planet's immune system was activating, but would it be enough to stop a creature that had destroyed hundreds of worlds? Una looked up at the darkening sky and saw the harvester descending through the clouds. Soon, it would be close enough to finish its feeding. Soon, it would be too late for any defense. The battle for Hangul 7 was about to begin. Una and the great bird stood at the entrance of the ancient structure as the sky grew darker. The harvester was now clearly visible, its massive tentacles reaching down through the atmosphere like the arms of a giant jellyfish, where the tentacles touched the ground. The land began to turn gray and lifeless. The bird made urgent sounds and began walking down the mountain path. Una followed, but she knew they were running out of time. Even if she could convince the colonies to work together, how could they fight something so massive? Halfway down the mountain, the bird stopped suddenly. It turned to face Una and made a series of complex musical sounds. Then, it did something that surprised her completely. The bird extended both wings toward her, not just one. Its feathers began to glow with soft blue light. The electrical activity around its body increased until sparks danced in the air between them. You want to form a permanent connection, Una realized, not just a brief touch like before. The bird nodded and stepped closer. Una could feel the electromagnetic energy radiating from its body. It was warm and strangely comforting, like standing near a fireplace on a cold night. She reached out with both hands and placed them on the bird's wings. The moment they touched, the world transformed around her. Suddenly, Una could sense every sky-touched creature on the planet, thousands of them, scattered across mountains and valleys and floating in the clouds above the Valari cities. Each one was unique, but all of them shared the same desperate urgency. They knew death was coming from space. Through the bird's senses, she could feel the harvester feeding. It was draining the planet's electromagnetic field, the energy that all life depended on. The process was slow, but steady. In 3 days, maybe 4, there would be nothing left. But she could also sense something else. The sky-touched creatures were not helpless. Each one had abilities that could contribute to a planetary defense. The small ones could generate focused electromagnetic pulses. The larger ones could store and redirect energy. The flying creatures could coordinate attacks from above. The problem was organization. Without central coordination, they were just individual animals acting on instinct. They needed someone to see the bigger picture and guide their efforts. Someone like Una herself. The connection with the bird deepened. She began to understand its thoughts and feelings. Its name, in the complex electromagnetic language of its kind, was something like Song of the Stormwind. It was old, even by the standards of its long-lived species. It had been waiting its entire life for this moment. waiting for someone who could bridge the gap between species and coordinate the planet's defense. "I understand," Una whispered, "but we still need help from the colonies. The humans in Valari have technology that could amplify your natural abilities." The bird, Song of the Stormwind, shared an image with her. It showed the three species working together in the ancient battle against the Harvesters, humans providing coordination and technology, Valari contributing their understanding of electromagnetic manipulation, sky-touched creatures supplying the raw power. Together, they had been strong enough to drive off the Harvesters. Alone, each species would be destroyed. Una pulled her hands away from the bird's wings, but the connection remained. She could still sense the network of sky-touched creatures across the planet. She could feel their hope and their fear. "We need to get to the human colony first," she said. "Administrator Park has to listen to me now." They made their way down the mountain as fast as they could. The bird flew overhead, scouting the path ahead. Through their connection, Una could see through its eyes. The landscape below was already beginning to change. Plants were wilting, streams were slowing to a trickle. The harvesters' feeding was affecting everything. When they reached Una's research station, she immediately tried to contact the human colony. The radio crackled with static, but she managed to get through. "Colonial Control, this is Dr. Kim. I have urgent information about the orbital threat. Request immediate meeting with Administrator Park." "Dr. Kim, where have you been? We've been trying to reach you for hours. The administrator wants you to evacuate immediately." "I'm not evacuating. I have information that could save the colony. The orbital object is alive, and it's feeding on our planet's energy. We have maybe 3 days before everything dies." There was a long pause. Then Administrator Park's voice came through the radio. "Dr. Kim, report to the colony immediately. We need to discuss this in person." Una looked at Song of the bird was perched on her observation deck, its feathers glowing softly in the strange light from the sky. "I'm bringing a sky-touched creature with me. It's essential to our defense planning." "Absolutely not. Those animals are unpredictable and dangerous. This one isn't. It's been trying to warn us about the threat. Without its help, we're all going to die." Another pause. "Fine, but any hostile behavior, and we're sedating it immediately." Una gathered her research data and equipment. Song of the Stormwind flew beside her transport vehicle as she drove down the mountain toward the human settlement. Through their connection, she could feel the bird's nervousness about entering human territory, but it was willing to take the risk if it meant saving the planet. The human colony of New Sol was built in a valley between two mountain ranges. It consisted of about 50 buildings surrounded by defensive walls. The colonists had come to Hanyul 7 to mine rare minerals, but they had stayed to build a new life away from Earth's overcrowded cities. When Una arrived at the main gate, she found Administrator Park waiting for her. He was a middle-aged man, with graying hair and worried eyes. Behind him stood several security guards, all watching Song of this Stormwind nervously. "Dr. Kim, I hope you have a good explanation for all of this. Our sensors are showing massive energy fluctuations across the planet. The Valari are refusing to communicate. And now you're claiming that bird can help us." Song of Vest landed on the ground beside Una. Up close, the colonists could see how magnificent the creature truly was. Its feathers shimmered with captured starlight. Its eyes held an intelligence that was unmistakably aware. "Administrator, this creature and others like it are the planet's natural defense system. They evolved over millions of years to fight off threats like the Harvester in orbit. But they need our help to coordinate their efforts." Park looked skeptical. "Even if that's true, what can we do? We're just miners and farmers. We don't have military equipment. We have computers and communication systems. We have electromagnetic amplifiers for the mining operations. Most importantly, we have the ability to work with the Valari and the sky-touched creatures as partners instead of treating them as obstacles." Song of the Stormwind made a soft musical sound and stepped closer to Park. The administrator backed away instinctively. "It's not going to hurt you," Una said. "It's trying to show you something." The bird extended one wing toward Park. After a moment's hesitation, he reached out and touched the glowing feathers. His eyes went wide as the connection formed. For just a few seconds, he experienced what Una had felt. The network of sky-touched creatures, the slow death of the planet. As the harvester fed, the desperate hope that the three species could work together once again. When the connection broke, Park staggered backward, but his expression had changed from skepticism to wonder. "My God," he whispered. "It's all true. The creature in orbit, the planetary network, everything." Una nodded. "Now, do you understand why we need to work together?" Park looked up at the darkening sky, where the harvester's tentacles were growing thicker and more numerous. Then he looked at Song of the Storm, who was watching him with patient, intelligent eyes. "What do you need from us?" he asked. Within an hour, the main meeting hall of New Sol Colony was filled with people. Word had spread quickly about the orbital threat and the strange alliance with the sky-touched creature. Some colonists were afraid. Others were excited. All of them were listening. Administrator Park stood at the front of the room with Una and Song of the Storm lined. The great bird perched calmly on a specially built stand, its feathers glowing softly in the artificial light. "Citizens Park began, we face a threat unlike anything in our history. Dr. Kim has discovered that the object in orbit is a living creature that feeds on planetary energy. Without immediate action, all life on Haniel 7 will be extinct within days." Murmurs filled the room. Some people looked skeptical. Others were already checking their personal communication devices, trying to contact family members. Una stepped forward. "The sky-touched creatures are our planet's natural defense system. They can fight the harvester, but only if we help them organize. We need to establish communication with the Valari and coordinate a three-species alliance." "What about evacuation?" called out someone from the crowd. "Why don't we just leave the planet?" "Because there isn't time," Park replied. "Our transport ships can carry maybe 200 people. We have over 3,000 colonists here, and the Valari population is in the millions. Most of us are staying whether we want to or not." Song of the Stormwind made a musical sound. Through her connection with the bird, Una could sense what it was trying to communicate. "It's showing me something," she said. "There are other harvesters coming. Even if we evacuated this planet, they would follow us. This is where we make our stand." The room fell silent. The reality of their situation was sinking in. A young man near the back raised his hand. "What do you need us to do?" Una felt a surge of hope. "We need to modify our communication and power systems to work with sky-touched creature abilities. We need volunteers to act as coordinators between species. And we need to contact the Valari immediately." Park nodded. "I'll authorize the equipment modifications, but the Valari situation is complicated. They've been refusing all communication." "Since the storm started, I know someone who might help," said a voice from the crowd. A young woman stepped forward. "My name is Mira. I work in the mining division. I've been trading with a Valari named Kuyun for the past 2 years. He's different from the others, more willing to work with humans." "Can you contact him?" Una asked. "I can try, but I'll need to go to the trading post at the edge of their territory. It's dangerous with the storm conditions." Song of the Stormwind made another sound and looked directly at Mira. The bird seemed to be evaluating her somehow. "It wants to send another sky-touched creature with you," Una interpreted, "for protection and to prove that the alliance is real." Myra looked nervous but determined. "If it helps save the planet, I'll do it." The meeting continued for another hour as they organized teams and assigned tasks. Engineers would work on modifying the communication systems. Scientists would study the data Una had collected about the harvesters. Medical staff would prepare for possible injuries during the defense efforts. But even as they planned, everyone could feel the situation getting worse. The artificial lights in the colony were flickering. Electronic devices were experiencing random malfunctions. The harvesters' feeding was affecting all electromagnetic systems on the planet. After the meeting, Una and Song of the Stormwind went to the colony's communication center. The technicians were already working to modify their equipment based on Una's specifications. "We're trying to create a hybrid system," explained the chief engineer, an older woman named Dr. Chen something that can translate between human digital signals, Valari electromagnetic pulses, and whatever the sky-touched creatures use. Song of this, Stormwind approached one of the modified communication devices. It placed a wing on the metal surface and made a series of complex sounds. Immediately, the device began to emit patterns of light and sound that resembled the birds. "Vocalizations. It's working," Dr. Chen said excitedly. The system is learning to interpret its communication patterns. Through the device, they could suddenly hear something amazing. Hundreds of voices all across the planet. Sky-touched creatures calling to each other, sharing information about the harvesters' feeding patterns, and organizing their own defensive positions. They're already coordinating on a basic level, Yuna realized, but they need higher-level strategic guidance. She placed her hand on the communication device next to Song of the Stormwind's wing. The connection amplified through the human technology, allowing her to sense sky-touched creatures she had never felt before. There were the small, fox-like creatures in the northern mountains, generating focused electromagnetic pulses. Large predators in the southern valleys were storing energy in specialized organs. Flying creatures above the Valari cities were mapping the harvesters' tentacle movements. But there were also disturbing gaps in the network. Entire regions where sky-touched creatures had gone silent. The harvesters' feeding was killing them faster than they could organize. A new voice crackled through the communication system. It was Mira, calling from the Valari trading post. I've made contact with Kiyun. He's willing to meet, but he says the Valari Council considers this a spiritual matter. They believe the harvester is a test from their gods. Tell him it's not a test, Yuna replied. It's an invasion, and if we don't work together, everyone dies. I'm trying, but he says I need to prove that the sky-touched creatures truly support the Alliance. The creature you sent with me isn't enough. Song of the Storm looked at Yuna with urgent eyes. Through their connection, she could feel its decision forming. We're coming to you, Yuna said into the communicator. All of us. What do you mean, all of us? Yuna looked around the communication center. Through the modified systems, she could sense sky-touched creatures across the continent beginning to move. They were converging on the Valari territory, following Song of Stormwind's call. We're bringing the entire network. If the Valari need proof that this alliance is real, we'll give them proof they can't ignore. The great bird spread its wings and let out a cry that was amplified through the communication system. The sound echoed across the planet, reaching every sky-touched creature still alive. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The voices answered the call. The migration had begun, but as they prepared to leave the human colony, alarms began sounding throughout the settlement. The power grid was failing. The harvesters' feeding had reached a critical point. Outside, the sky was turning black. The harvester was descending closer to the planet's surface, its massive tentacles now reaching deep into the atmosphere. Where they touched, the very air seemed to die. We're running out of time, Park said grimly. Even if you convince the Valari to help, will it be enough? Yuna looked at Song of this Stormwind, then at the readings from the sky-touched creature network. Many of the signals were weakening. The planetary defense system was dying, along with everything else. It has to be enough, she said, because if this doesn't work, there won't be another chance. The great bird took flight, heading toward Valari territory. Behind it, a stream of sky-touched creatures began emerging from their hiding places, large and small, predator and prey, all flying or running or crawling toward the same destination. The greatest migration in the planet's history had begun, and at its head flew Song of this Stormwind, carrying Yuna's hopes and the fate of 3 species on its glowing wings. The final confrontation was approaching, but first, they had to convince the Valari that some battles were too important for pride or tradition. Some battles required everyone to work together, or everyone would die. Together, the Valari trading post sat on a floating platform at the edge of their territory. When Yuna arrived with Song of the Stormwind, she found hundreds of sky-touched creatures already gathering in the air around it. They circled the platform in complex patterns, their bodies glowing with stored electromagnetic energy. Mira was waiting for them with a young Valari male. He was tall and slender like all his people, with skin that shifted color based on his emotions. Right now, those colors showed deep concern mixed with wonder. This is Kiyun, Mira said. He's been watching the creatures arrive for the past hour. I think we've got his attention. Kiyun stepped forward and spoke in accented human language. I have never seen the sky-touched ones behave this way. They are usually solitary, territorial. This gathering violates everything we know about their nature. Song of the Stormwind landed on the platform and walked directly to Kiyun. The skin colors shifted to show surprise and fear. But the great bird simply extended one wing in greeting. It wants to share information with you, Una explained, the same way it shared with me and Administrator Park. Will you let it? Kyun looked uncertain. Contact with sky-touched creatures is forbidden, except for trained shamans. I am just a trader. You're someone who cares about the truth, Myra said. That's more important than training right now. Above them, more sky-touched creatures were arriving every minute. The air around the platform hummed with electromagnetic energy. Some of the trading post's equipment began to malfunction from the interference. Kyun watched the gathering with growing amazement. Even if I wanted to help, the Council would never approve an alliance with humans. You are considered contaminated. Unable to understand the sacred nature of the sky-touched ones, then don't ask the Council, Una said. Make the decision yourself. She placed her hand on Song of the Stormwind's wing. Immediately, the electromagnetic network came alive around them. Through the connection, she could sense every sky-touched creature within hundreds of miles. But she could also sense the harvesters. Feeding growing stronger, entire sections of the network were going dark as creatures died or lost their connection to the planetary field. We're losing them, she said urgently. The harvester is killing the network faster than we can organize. Kyun stepped closer, drawn by the obvious distress in her voice. What do you see? Death Una replied. The slow death of everything on this planet, your people, my people, every living thing that depends on electromagnetic energy to survive. Song of the Storm made a sharp cry and looked up at the sky. Through their connection, Una felt what the bird was sensing. The harvester was beginning its final feeding phase. The massive creature was positioning itself directly over the planet's electromagnetic core. It's starting the kill sequence, she realized. We have maybe 6 hours before the planetary field collapses completely. Kyun's skin colors shifted to show deep alarm. 6 hours, our shaman said. We had days remaining. Your shamans were wrong. The harvester is more efficient than the old records indicated. It's learned from its previous feedings. The young Valari looked at the sky-touched creatures circling overhead, then at Song of the Stormwind, then at Una's desperate face. Something in his expression changed. Show me, he said, reaching toward the great bird's extended wing. The moment his hand touched the glowing feathers, Kyun's entire body went rigid. His skin flashed through a rapid sequence of colors as his mind processed the information flowing through the network. He saw the harvester as it truly was, a cosmic parasite that had consumed hundreds of worlds. He felt the fear and determination of thousands of sky-touched creatures preparing for a battle they might not survive. He experienced Una's human perspective, her desperate hope that the 3 species could work together. When the connection ended, Kyun staggered backward. His skin had settled into colors that Mira had never seen before, a complex pattern that seemed to show awe and terror and resolve all at once. The old stories are true, he whispered. The Devourers have returned. Will you help us? Una asked. Kyun looked up at the gathering sky-touched creatures, then at the dark shape of the harvester, visible through the storm clouds. I will do more than help. I will take you to the Heart of Winds. Mira looked confused. What's the Heart of Winds? The central control node for all Valari floating cities, Kyun explained. It was built on the site where our ancestors first defeated the Devourers. If we are to make a stand, that is where it must happen. Song of the Stormwind let out a triumphant cry that was echoed by hundreds of other creatures. Through the network, Una could feel their excitement and hope. Finally, the alliance was forming. The journey to the Heart of Winds took 3 hours. Kyun piloted a Valari transport vessel while Una coordinated with the sky-touched creatures through her connection with Song of the Stormwind. Myra handled communications with the human colony as they traveled deeper into Valari territory. More floating cities became visible. They hung in the air like glowing jellyfish, connected by streams of electromagnetic energy. But many of them were dark or flickering, their power systems failing as the harvester continued to feed. The outer cities have already been evacuated, Kyun explained. The council ordered everyone to retreat to the inner sanctuaries. They believe prayer and meditation will protect us. Prayer won't stop the harvester, Una said, but coordinated electromagnetic resistance might. The Heart of Winds was the largest of the Valari cities, a massive structure that floated a mile above the ground. As they approached, Yuna could see ancient symbols carved into its crystalline walls, the same symbols she had found in the mountain structure. This is where it all began, she realized. This is where your people first learned to work with the sky-touched creatures. Kiyun nodded. The Heart of Winds contains the old knowledge, but it has been sealed for centuries. Only the High Council has access to the inner chambers. Then we need to convince them to open it, as their transport. Docked with the floating city, alarms began sounding throughout the structure. The Harvester had begun its final descent. Its massive form now filled a quarter of the sky, its tentacles reaching deep into the planet's atmosphere. Valari citizens rushed through the corridors in panic. Their skin colors flashed with fear and confusion. Many of them stopped to stare at Yuna and Mira, the first humans they had ever seen inside their sacred city. Kiyun led them quickly through the maze of passages, toward the central chamber. Behind them, Song of the Stormwind flew through the corridors, its presence causing even more amazement among the Valari. They reached the central chamber, just as the High Council was preparing to begin an emergency meditation session. 12 elderly Valari sat in a circle around a glowing crystal that pulsed with the same energy as the sky-touched creatures. Kiyun of the Outer Territories, one of them spoke, their skin showing displeasure. "You bring contamination into our sacred space during the hour of greatest need." "Honored ones, I bring salvation," Kiyun replied. "These humans understand the true nature of the Devourer. They can help us coordinate the ancient defenses." The council members' skin colors shifted to show various degrees of skepticism and outrage. But before any of them could speak, Song of the entered the chamber. The great bird's presence changed everything. The glowing crystal in the center of the room began pulsing faster, resonating with the creature's electromagnetic field. Ancient symbols on the walls began to light up, systems that had been dormant for thousands of years. "Impossible," whispered one of the council members. "The Heart of Winds recognizes the creature's authority." Song of the Stormwind walked to the center of the chamber and placed both wings on the crystal. Immediately, the entire city began to hum with power. The old defensive systems were coming online. "The time for meditation is over," Yuna said. "The battle begins now." Through her connection with Song of the Stormwind, she could feel the network of sky-touched creatures taking their positions around the planet. Human technology was amplifying their abilities. Valari cities were becoming nodes in a planetary defense grid. Above them, the Harvester sensed the change. For the first time in its long existence, it encountered a world that was fighting back. Its feeding tentacles began to withdraw as electromagnetic pulses from the surface started to interfere with its energy absorption. But the creature was not defenseless. It began to descend faster, trying to reach the planet's surface before the defenses could fully organize. The final battle had begun. 3 species, working together for the first time in centuries, against a cosmic predator that had never known defeat. In the center of the Heart of Winds, surrounded by glowing crystals and ancient symbols, Yuna felt the weight of every life. On the planet resting on her connection with Song of the Stormwind, the sky was answering their call. But would it be enough? The battle for Haniel 7 began at dawn on the 4th day. Yuna stood in the center of the Heart of Winds, her hands placed on the ancient crystal alongside Song of the Stormwind's wings. Through their connection, she could coordinate thousands of sky-touched creatures across the planet's surface. The Harvester had descended to within 50 miles of the ground. Its massive tentacles were now thick as mountains, reaching deep into the atmosphere to drain the last reserves of electromagnetic energy. Where they touched, the very air turned gray and lifeless. But for the first time in the creature's long existence, its feeding was being resisted. "Phase 1 begin," Yuna said, into the communication system that now linked all 3 species across the planet. Small sky-touched creatures began generating focused electromagnetic pulses. The fox-like animals in the northern mountains, the bird creatures above the Valari cities, even tiny insects that glowed with stored energy. Each pulse was weak individually, but coordinated together, they created a wave of interference that disrupted the Harvester's feeding patterns. The massive creature shuddered in space, its tentacles writhing as they lost their grip on the planet's energy field. "It's working." Administrator Park's voice came through the radio from the human colony. "Our power systems are stabilizing. The electromagnetic drain has slowed significantly. But Yuna could feel through the network that the small creatures were exhausting themselves. They could not maintain this level of output for long. Phase 2, she called out. The larger sky-touched creatures joined the battle. Predators that had stored electromagnetic energy in specialized organs began releasing it in coordinated bursts. The timing had to be perfect, each burst synchronized with the others to create maximum interference with the harvester's feeding tentacles. Song of this, Tormwind coordinated the attacks, its calls echoing through the network as it directed each creature's contribution. The great bird's feathers blazed with captured energy, making it look like a living star in the center of the chamber. Above them, the harvester began to change its tactics. Instead of trying to drain the entire planet gradually, it focused its tentacles on specific locations. If it could not feed on everything at once, it would consume individual regions, one at a time. It's targeting the human colony, Mira reported from her position at the communication station. 3 tentacles are converging on New Sol. Yuna felt a surge of panic through the network. The sky-touched creatures in that region were already exhausted from the first 2 phases of the defense. They did not have enough energy left to resist a focused attack. "We need the Valari cities," she said to Kiyun. "Can your people redirect power from the floating cities to support the ground defenses?" Kiyun spoke rapidly to the High Council. In their own language, the elderly Valari looked uncertain, their skin colors showing conflict between tradition and necessity. "They say the cities have never been used as weapons," Kiyun translated. "It goes against our most sacred beliefs." "Then your sacred beliefs are going to get everyone killed." Yuna snapped song of the storm wind, let out a sharp cry, and looked directly at the High Council. Through the network, Yuna could feel what the bird was trying to communicate. It was showing them images from the ancient battle. When the Valari cities had been part of the planetary defense, one of the council members, an elderly female with skin like shifting starlight, stepped forward. "The sky-touched one speaks truth. Our ancestors did not hesitate to use every tool available. We dishonor them with our hesitation." She placed her hands on a control crystal, and immediately the Heart of Winds began to hum with power. Energy flowed from the floating city toward the ground-based sky-touched creatures, amplifying their abilities beyond anything they had achieved before. The effect was immediate. The focused electromagnetic pulses from the surface became powerful enough to physically push back the harvester's tentacles. The massive creature's attack on the human colony faltered as its feeding apparatus was disrupted. But the harvester was learning. It began to adapt its tentacles, changing their electromagnetic signature to avoid the interference. The creature had consumed hundreds of worlds. It had faced resistance before, though never this organized or determined. "It's adapting faster than we can counter," Una reported. "We need Phase 3 now." Phase 3 was the most dangerous part of their plan. Instead of just interfering with the harvester's feeding, they would attempt to reverse the energy flow, turn the creature from predator into prey. This required precise coordination between all 3 species, human technology to amplify and direct the energy, Valari knowledge to manipulate electromagnetic fields on a massive scale, sky-touched creatures to generate the raw power needed for the reversal. Most importantly, it required Yuna to open her mind completely to the planetary network, to become not just a coordinator, but a living conduit for the combined will of 3 species. "Are you sure about this?" Kyun asked, his skin showing deep concern. "The energy levels required could kill you. If we don't try this, we're all dead anyway," Yuna replied. She placed both hands on the central crystal and opened her mind fully to Song of the Stormwind's connection. The sensation was overwhelming. Suddenly, she was linked not just to every sky-touched creature on the planet, but to the electromagnetic signature of every Valari city and every human technological system. She was the living network, the planetary consciousness that could see and coordinate everything at once. "Now," she whispered. The reversal began slowly. Instead of allowing the harvester to drain energy from the planet, the network began pushing energy back up through its tentacles. The creature's own feeding apparatus became the conduit for its destruction. At first, the harvester did not understand what was happening. It had never encountered a world that could fight back this way. Its tentacles continued their feeding motions even as energy flowed backward into its body. But as the power levels increased, the creature began to realize the danger. It tried to withdraw its tentacles, but they had become locked into the planetary electromagnetic field. The same force that had allowed it to drain worlds was now being used against it. Energy levels are approaching critical, Administrator, Park reported. The harvester is starting to take significant damage. Through the network, Una could feel the massive creature's distress. It was experiencing something it had never known before: fear. For millions of years, it had been the ultimate predator. Now, it was becoming prey. But the effort was taking its toll on the planetary defense network. Sky-touched creatures were collapsing from exhaustion. Valari cities were having their power systems overloaded. Human equipment was burning out from the extreme energy levels, and Una herself was approaching the limits of what her mind could handle. The connection to the entire planetary network was burning through her consciousness like fire through paper. "I can't hold it much longer," she gasped. Song of the storm wind made a decision. The great bird pressed closer to Una and opened its own mind completely, sharing not just its connection to the network, but its own life force. The two consciousnesses merged into something new, something stronger than either could be alone. Together, they pushed the energy reversal to its maximum level. The harvester's feeding tentacles began to glow white-hot as more power flowed back into its body than it had ever absorbed from any single world. The creature's anguished cry echoed across space, a sound of pain and defeat that every living thing on Haniel 7 could feel in their bones. With a final convulsion, the harvester's tentacles released their grip on the planet's electromagnetic field. The massive creature began to retreat, its body damaged and its feeding apparatus completely disrupted. But even in defeat, the harvester sent out a signal that chilled Una to her core. Through the network, she could sense the message spreading across space, a warning to others of its kind, a call for vengeance. "It's calling for reinforcements," she said weakly. "Other harvesters will come." Song of the Stormwind shared an image with her through their merged consciousness, not of fear, but of hope. The signal the harvester had sent would indeed reach others of its kind, but it would also reach other worlds with sky-touched creatures, other planets that could learn to defend themselves. "We've started something," Una realized, "a network that goes beyond just our world." As the harvester disappeared into the depths of space, leaving behind only a fading electromagnetic signature, the planetary defense network began to power down. Sky-touched creatures across Haniel 7 settled into exhausted rest. Valari cities dimmed their emergency lighting. Human equipment returned to normal operation levels. Una collapsed to her knees, her connection to the network fading as Song of the Stormwind gently withdrew its shared consciousness. But the bond between them remained. She could still sense the great bird's thoughts and feelings, and it could sense hers. "Is it over?" Kiyun asked, his skin showing cautious hope. "This battle is over," Una replied, "but there will be others. The harvesters won't give up easily. They'll return with greater numbers and new tactics. Then we'll be ready for them." Administrator Park's voice came through the communication system, all three species working together. Over the following weeks, as Haniel 7 recovered from the battle, a new kind of civilization began to emerge. The artificial barriers between humans, Valari, and sky-touched creatures dissolved. Research stations were established where all three species could work together. Communication networks were built that allowed constant coordination across the planet. Una found herself at the center of it all. No longer the isolated scientist studying strange animals, she had become the bridge between worlds, the living proof that cooperation was possible even between the most different species. Song of the Storm became her constant companion, perching outside her new laboratory in the heart of winds. Together, they worked to establish contact with sky-touched creatures on other worlds, building a galactic network that could coordinate defenses against future harvester attacks. 3 months after the battle, Una stood on the observation deck of her new research facility. The sun was setting over the Valari floating cities, their lights twinkling like stars in the twilight sky. Below, human settlements dotted the landscape, their buildings designed to harmonize with the natural electromagnetic flows of the planet. Song of this Stormwind landed on the railing beside her, its feathers catching the last rays of sunlight. Around them, other sky-touched creatures circled peacefully, no longer hiding from the settlements, but living alongside them as partners and guardians. Contact established with Kepler-4 for Tubi, Myra reported from inside the facility. She had become the head of interplanetary communications, her experience in bridging cultures making her perfect for the role. They're reporting strange objects in their outer system. Possible Harvester scouts. Send them the defensive protocols, Una replied, and let them know we're here if they need support. She placed her hand on Song of the Stormwind's wing, feeling the familiar warmth of their connection. Through the network they had built together, she could sense sky-touched creatures on dozens of worlds, all linked by their shared purpose of protecting life from cosmic predators. Kyun emerged from the facility carrying a data crystal. The crystal. Latest reports from the outer colonies, he said. 17 worlds have now successfully implemented the 3-species defense model. The Harvesters are finding it increasingly difficult to locate undefended targets. Una smiled as she took the crystal. A year ago, she had been completely alone, rejected by both human and Valari society. Now she was part of something larger than any single world or species. She was untouched no longer. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Song of the Stormwind let out a soft call. Other sky-touched creatures answered from all directions, their voices creating a harmony that seemed to encompass the entire planet. The song was picked up by the communication networks and transmitted to other worlds, where other sky-touched creatures added their own voices to the chorus. Across the galaxy, the network grew stronger with each passing day. Somewhere in the depths of space, the Harvesters continued their ancient hunger, seeking worlds to consume. But now they faced something they had never encountered before, a galaxy that was learning to fight back, and at the center of that resistance, on a small world called Hanyo 7, a human scientist and a magnificent bird stood together on a platform, surrounded by the lights of 3 civilizations working as one. The sky had answered their call, and it would continue to answer, for as long as there were worlds to protect and lives to save. Una was no longer the one untouched by all. She had become the one who touched all, connecting species across the stars in an alliance that would echo through eternity. The Falcon had descended, and the galaxy would never be the same.